Hi guys, thanks everyone for coming. Welcome to the first GreenHomeNYC forum event of the year, the Green Catwalk. My name's Harris Krismanich. I'm a volunteer with the forum's planning committee. For those of you who don't know, Green Home is a all volunteer nonprofit that's been around since 2002. Our mission is to promote a sustainable built environment. We do this through 3 educational programs. The first being the Green Careers Group, which focuses on promoting green professional development and providing networking opportunities for pretty much anyone interested in transitioning into green careers. Second, we have the Tours Group, which provides opportunities to have a closer look at the various energy efficient and sustainable buildings in New York and sometimes in New Jersey as well. And then lastly, we have the Forums Group, where we have presentations and panel discussions like the one tonight on topics relating to different aspects of sustainability. Usually it's a very narrow topic. Tonight's a little bit different. In addition to that, we also have our blog on our website, GreenHomeNYC.org. So be sure to subscribe to them and follow us on our socials, all at GreenHomeNYC. Also, if you're interested in volunteering and getting involved, you can send us an email. My email's harris@greenhomeny.org. So on to tonight's it's a little bit of it's a variety. It's a taste of what's to come for Green Home this year. We have center, and they're going to discuss a little bit of their work and some projects that they're working on. With that, I'm going to hand it off to Celeste McMickle. She's the Director, Client Solutions of True Zero Waste at U.S. Green Building Council. Celeste will talk about the importance of the circular economy, about zero waste, and resource efficiency. So Celeste, take it away, and I will stop sharing.
Thanks, Harris. And hey, everyone. It's so great to be here with all of you tonight. I love Green Home, and I especially love the Green Catwalk event. To me, it's really one of the best events that happens in sustainability throughout the year. I always look forward to it. I've been lucky enough to participate in it before as well. I don't know if some of you have ever seen. I previously worked for Stephen Winter Associates and also DSNY and the New York City Compost Project. And it was actually through the Green Catwalk event that I sort of started on my passion into zero waste. So I'm very grateful for all the work they do. And I hope you all are inspired tonight the way I've been inspired in the past. So I am going to go ahead and share my screen here. And hopefully everyone is now seeing that okay. If you're not, give me an indicator. Otherwise, I'll assume it's all good to go. So I work for True Zero Waste certification with the USGBC. Many of you may be familiar with the USGBC because of our LEED certification program, but what folks don't necessarily always realize is that we have a number of other programs that address different facets of sustainability. So we have programs in the energy world, waste world, sites, all kinds of things. Today, I'm going to be focusing on True and zero waste in the circular economy. So I'm looking forward to chatting with you about that more. So for those of you that are newer to the zero waste conversation or the waste reduction conversation, I always like to start with this slide because I think it does a pretty good job of indicating why recycling on its own is not really quite doing enough to reduce the amount of material that is being sent to landfill. So here you can see over the last number of decades, we've been increasing significantly the amount of material that's being sent to recycling, but that isn't reducing the amount that's being sent to landfill. There's a lot of reasons for this. And if people have questions about recycling infrastructure and recycling processes, I've been working in this world for quite a while, so I would be happy to address specific questions in that maybe in the Q&A, but for now I'll just say that recycling is a very complex issue that has a number of challenges, and I think a lot of it stems down to this idea of convenience culture. And I don't know about all of you, but when I was in school, I might be a little older, but we were taught reduce, reuse, recycle, the 3 R's, right? And I think over especially the last couple of decades, that's really moved into just the recycle. Like that is the thing that the industry has grabbed a hold of. That is the thing that we now focus on. And that really has a lot to do with convenience culture, which makes sense and has its place, but it's not really helping us in the quest to reduce the amount of material that we're sending to landfill. So a big conversation right now in the waste and materials management world, which I prefer to call it, I try and move away from the word waste because that indicates that there are certain materials out there that are worthless or useless, and that's actually not the case. This is all about materials management, right? All of these materials are useful in some way. We're just not capturing their full potential in our current linear economy. So we have on the left is that current economy, which is very much about taking materials from nature, making them into products that we use, and then when we dispose of them, they become pollution. Not a great system. So moving things towards the circular economy is looking at ways that we can make products out of recycled materials that we are then using, reusing, remaking them into new products that then enter the economy again, and thus the circular system continues. So a lot of what I'm going to be talking about today, and a real tenet of the program that I work on, is working towards moving the entire system towards this more circular economy. And there's a lot of cool resources for this happening in New York right now, so I would definitely recommend checking those out as well. I'm happy to share them. Another thing that is a bit depressing, unfortunately, but is also important to discuss is this idea of a wasteberg. So a wasteberg, you get the concept, it's like an iceberg where the majority of the material is buried under the surface. In this case, what we're talking about here is for the consumer perspective, for every 1 ton of waste we as individuals generate, there are actually 71 tons approximately of industrial waste that are generated before the product gets to you. So that's a real problem, right? And I think I am fully on board. I'm a really avid recycler. I'm a really avid composter. That's how I got into this world. I think individual action is huge, but I also think that it's incredibly important for companies and corporations to take a stand, because that is where this 71 tons of industrial waste is coming from, right? It's not coming from us as individuals. It is more so coming from the companies that are making these products. So focusing on policies and programs that are going to help move us in the direction of the circular economy can't just start with us as consumers. It's actually a real challenge with the recycling industry in general that the focus is all on the consumers. We need to put it back onto the companies and corporations. So I'll also just touch quickly on the phrase zero waste, because I think it can be a bit of a confusing catchphrase. It's a popular one, especially these days. We see it a lot in social media, people living zero waste lifestyles or companies making zero waste commitments, but it can be hard to really pinpoint exactly what it is. And to me, that's one of the really valuable things that the USGBC has done, the nonprofit that I work for. We have really made our name in the world creating standards around sustainability issues, such as LEED as an example, that then become that clear standard that is recognizable internationally for achieving that particular goal. So that's really what we're working on internally at the USGBC and with TRIP. I can't explain what zero waste is without talking about the zero waste hierarchy of highest and best use. We have used the definition that was created by ZWIA, and ZWIA is the Zero Waste International Alliance. They've been working in this world for a long time. I definitely recommend checking out their work. And they developed, alongside with the EPA, this concept of the zero waste hierarchy. So I'll explain it quickly. In this upside down triangle, at the top tiers, the top 2 tiers specifically, we have concepts that are more related to keeping materials out of the waste stream. So these are things like redesigning materials so that they last longer or can be more useful, reducing the amount of materials that are used, returnable programs, reuse programs, repair programs, which goes along with remanufacture. So these are things that can be done to prevent waste from being created in the first place. These are called also, as a little industry term, upstream solutions. Then the bottom two tiers, these are ways of managing waste that has already been created. So these are things that are referred to as downstream solutions. So the top two tiers, we have upstream, the bottom two tiers, we have downstream. Now you'll notice recycling and composting is in the downstream solution. A lot of people think, again, if we think back to that first slide that showed the amount of material that's being sent to recycling, we think of that as like the best thing to do, right? But when we actually look at the zero waste hierarchy, the far more environmentally preferable approaches are in these more upstream solutions, and recycling and compost, although again, avid composter, avid recycler, these are not the more preferable ways for us to be using our materials. And then of course we have landfill, incineration, and the environment at the bottom. So now I'm going to very quickly run through some aspects of true certification. I'm going to try and be very quick. So I'll put my chat, my information in the chat and everything like that, so you can reach out to me if you have further questions. So True is a zero waste certification program, a lot of alignment with LEED. There's going to be a lot of overlap between this program and that platform, if that's something that you're familiar with. We certify buildings, we certify events, and we certify construction projects to zero waste. The goal of all of our projects is to divert all solid waste from landfill, incineration, which includes waste to energy and the environment. This can be a bit unusual. A lot of zero waste programs will include incineration and zero waste. This can be really problematic because there's quite a few social justice issues associated with incineration. And it's really important to acknowledge those and look for other strategies. So we do not consider incineration to be an appropriate strategy. True is designed around using the zero waste hierarchy and turning it into a usable program that can be implemented on a site-by-site basis. So you'll see what that means over the next couple slides, but a lot of it looks at rethinking internal policies and redesigning business practices from a circular perspective so that we're looking at those materials as resources rather than waste. There's a lot of cost-saving opportunities built in and a lot of environmental benefits built in as well, which is great. We have each strategy within the rating system is really meant to help on that journey to zero waste. So by implementing the rating system, that's actually going to help businesses and facilities get to that goal. Similar to LEED, we have 4 tiers of certification: silver, certified silver, gold, and platinum, with different point thresholds lining up with those different achievement levels. This is a broad overview of all of our credit categories and associated points. We tried to really look at a robust program for what would be needed to implement zero waste on a facility basis. So on the left-hand side, you can see things like redesign, reuse, reduction, all of those elements that were in the zero waste hierarchy. And then on the right-hand side and elsewhere, you can see other things like leadership and training and zero waste analysis, things that are going to really bring everyone on board with the program and give it longevity throughout the lifetime of that building, which is super important. This is just a quick breakdown between upstream and downstream. You can see the point thresholds associated with the credits associated with waste or materials, I should say. And you can see we're heavily weighted towards the upstream. This very quickly is just to demonstrate a diversion tracker. I'm happy to talk more about this or get into it if folks are interested. I can send the actual spreadsheet. The main takeaway here is that we're actually including items such as reduction and reuse in the diversion tracker. So we're not only looking at things like recycling, composting, landfill, we're also including some of those zero waste strategies, which is super important. As far as eligibility, we've certified all number of facilities at this point, including construction and also some events. We're really excited. We have a number of projects in New York and a restaurant that actually just came on board. So if folks are interested in that, I can send that along to participate and enjoy a zero waste restaurant experience in New York City. We have a couple different tiers that facilities can start with: pre-certification, move to full certification, and then even recertify. We do have a number of overlaps with LEED. I'm not going to get into that right now, but just so you can see that they exist and there's real opportunities for connection there. And we have certifications all over the world. We are a global program. The majority of our projects are currently in the US, but they extend beyond the borders as well. For manufacturing facilities, they have the ability to put that the product was manufactured in a zero waste facility on the product. So if you ever see this in a store, now you'll know what that's about. And then the last thing I'll just touch on very quickly is that we also have a True Advisor professional certificate program. And this is something that is great for folks that are looking to get involved in zero waste, to learn more about zero waste practices and principles. It's also a deep dive into true certification. So I really recommend it for anyone that is looking to make a career change or add this to their suite of services. It's a great consulting opportunity. It's great for students. Feel free to reach out to me. I can probably get you a discount. I highly recommend it. There's about 1,500 True Advisors all over the world, and they're a really great community, and we try and work really closely with the True Advisors that we have, because they're really what make the programs successful. These are True Advisors in action, out in the field, doing all the hard work of auditing and waste sorting and things like that. So that is all for me. Thank you so much for having me, and I will pass things on to the next speaker.
Great. Thank you, Celeste. Next speaker is Jackson Chabot. He's the Director of Open Space Management, or Public Space Management at Open Plans. And with that, Jackson, take it away.
Good evening, everyone. As I get this going, I invite you to drop your favorite public space in the chat. So that might be a local park, it might be a destination, might be a beach, and since the pandemic, it might be an open street as well. So go ahead and drop that in the chat as we get started here. So a little bit about Open Plans. We were founded in 1999. Although it says sharing is paused. Can you all see the screen?
See the screen, it shows on the non-full page, like first page.
Okay.
You might want to navigate over to the program.
Yeah. How about this?
Yeah, okay, now it's good.
Okay. So we were founded in 1999, and our mission is to create truly livable streets for a livable New York City. So we use several ways that we do this, including tactile urbanism, grassroots advocacy, and really through policy as well. The other piece that I'd add is we're also the home to street blog and street film, if you're familiar with those two journalistic arms. And what will become apparent throughout the presentation later on is we're really focused on structural reform. We don't do necessarily individual campaigns, perhaps as you see here with the Dyckman Open Street, but we're really looking at how we could have a network of open streets and public space management as well, I'll talk about today, this evening, throughout the city. So, as you consider your favorite public space throughout the city, I want you to also question, how is this managed? What would public space management look like to keep this space safe, clean, and joyful? So some of the considerations we think about are exactly that. Sanitation as one example, programming on the other side of the screen as another example. And then now with the Open Restaurants program, coordination of open streets and outdoor dining structures across the city. So these are some examples visually of what public space management could be. The current state of public space management is largely in the realm of business improvement districts, or BIDs, as well as friends of groups and conservancies. And so those three groups, and primarily BIDs in the context of this conversation, manage some of New York City's most successful public spaces. Successful is a super subjective term, but we know that business improvement districts have the funding, staff, and mandate to properly manage public spaces, which enables them to do the sanitation removal, enables them to do the programming, and also it has been an enabler for them to transform public spaces to be more pedestrian friendly and therefore safer. However, this is a significant issue because only 2% of New York City is managed by business improvement districts. So there's a huge need and demand that is outside of commercial areas. And as you can see on the map here, the commercial areas that are serviced by business improvement districts are largely in Manhattan and in a lot of obvious places. So you'll see from the map here that Upper Manhattan and the outer boroughs are largely left uncared for, unmanaged by a function. What happens then is that under-resourced areas and residential areas are particularly impacted from this lack of coverage. We've seen, though, that there's potential. We know that our streets and sidewalks are more than just traffic conduits. They are our public spaces where our city life takes place. So our streets and sidewalks are our front yards. They're where neighbors meet, children play, commerce happens, and simple things like people watching occur. We've seen this with pre-pandemic programs like summer streets and weekend walks, as well as our neighbors informally taking care of public space. We've seen this with organizations such as Street Lab on the left, doing programming in a variety of public spaces, including streets, as well as advocacy groups like the 34th Avenue Open Streets Coalition, advocating for themselves and the continuation of their open streets over a year ago. We've also seen this specifically through thematic areas like greening public space, whether it's informally and people and organizations like block associations adding an additional touch of greenery, as well as organizations like business improvement districts. And we've seen this through city programs, through the neighborhood loading zones pilot program, as well as through the implementation of bike corrals across the city and thinking through how do we literally reallocate space in our city away from private vehicles and for their movement and storage towards people and people-centered uses. So the possibility that we see is that New York City needs a governance model to actualize streets as public spaces so that we can enable and realize a vision for a livable city. So we put forth 4 recommendations that you see here. We have the Office of Public Space Management, creating that, defining sectors per community board district or some geographic area. The third is having the DOT create a street hierarchy. And the fourth is New York City agencies creating a toolkit. So the first, with the creation of an Office of Public Space Management, we're seeing that the new administration is restructuring some of the things within city government. So this placement might look a little bit different under the context of the current administration, but similar type of context where it would have a director appointed by the mayor, as well as a small central staff that's really charged with the creation, implementation, and coordination of managing public space. The other piece that is coupled with is having these geographic areas that have public space managers assigned to them. So thinking of them really as all of the staff as proactive problem solvers. The public space managers might not be the people that do the literal picking up of trash on the street, but if they see illegal dumping, they're the ones that would coordinate and liaison with DSNY, for example, to make sure issues are taken care of in a timely manner. We also see this as a potential for a jobs program similar to the Cleanup Corps, which has been true over the past year or so with the pandemic as a starting point. The next point is we see that there's a need for the DOT to create a street hierarchy. And so this graphic here was included in the New York City Streets Plan and begins to get at what that is. Unfortunately, to date, they have yet to define what some of these streets and what the categories are. But what we were thinking is travel streets, community streets, and living streets. We recognize that certainly some streets need to be allocated for buses. Some streets need to be allocated for truck routes. But if we think beyond that, we know that we can have streets for other uses. We like to point to Barcelona's superblocks as an example of this. And that means that there could be additional space for children to play, for more bioswales, for more street trees, among other things in our city. And we also think that that piece would enable transparency. In the same way here, we want New York City agencies to create a toolkit with clear guidelines that define different street treatments and uses that are allowed on specific types of streets. We saw that during the application process for a lot of open streets, there wasn't a transparent reason for why certain open streets didn't get selected. And so we would like to see across this toolkit a transparent mechanism to understand why things are or are not implemented in certain areas. So for example, you see here bioswales, a play street, which was actually converted in Jackson Heights next to a school and Traverse Park there, as well as street seats. And so in conclusion, we know that public space management is often a precursor for design changes. The bioswale that you saw in the last image is they're usually not implemented unless there's a partner that is tasked with maintaining them. Otherwise, if you walk around the city, you'll see trash in tree beds, trash in bioswales. And that's a function because there's a lack of comprehensive management, maintenance, and care as a framework across the city. As I've been thinking about it a lot recently, where as we consider public space in New York City, considering it via the lens of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, if we don't have safe and clean public space, we certainly can't get to joyful public space. And I believe that all communities in New York City deserve joyful, safe, and clean public space, whether that's from East Harlem, as you see in the top left portion of the screen. The next image over is in Woodhaven in Queens, the East Village in the bottom right, or in downtown Brooklyn. Thank you.
Thanks, Jackson. Great presentation. Next, we have Sierra Fan, co-founder and COO of ILU, or is that how you pronounce it?
That's right, it's ILU.
Yeah, ILU. Okay. Sierra will talk about the distributed renewable energy systems and how her company's management software assists field teams. Take it away, Sierra.
Okay. Thanks for the intro, Harris. Really glad to be here. Let me pull up my presentation. Here you go. All right. Hello, everyone. I am here to talk about distributed renewable energy, and I think the thing that will make this presentation a little bit different from the others is I'm kind of bringing in a bit of a global perspective as well. This is distributed renewables in terms of microgrids, in terms of solar and storage is obviously a really hot topic in New York City, especially after Hurricane Sandy and managing resilience there. But a lot of my experience has also been globally, working on very similar systems for some similar goals, some different ones. And at least to me, it's really interesting to see some of the kind of similarities in these kind of all across the globe. So I wanted to share that and a little bit of what the work I'm doing at ILU is trying to help with distributed renewable energy systems, no matter where you are, whether that's New York City, whether that's Myanmar, or whether that's Nigeria. So yeah, this is, just a quick snapshot of some of my experience around the world working with mostly distributed solar. Some snapshots from Philippines, Myanmar, South Africa, Nigeria here. And I just wanted to give a little bit of context around kind of the US and also the global kind of status for DREs. So there are kind of three main things that are driving the adoption of distributed renewable energy. The main one that we see in the US that people are probably the most familiar with is around power reliability and resilience. So things like microgrids, which are standalone energy systems that can produce electricity through things like solar panels or backup generation, and also store electricity using batteries and then provide that to the loads kind of on site. A lot of that is now being installed and used for reliability purposes against extreme weather events, whether that's wildfires over here in California where I am, whether that's kind of hurricanes, tornadoes that we've been seeing. And this is really critical to a lot of businesses, kind of facilities, including hospitals and schools, to be able to actually provide power and keep a lot of kind of critical services on during those times. I think, globally, through working, especially in Sub-Saharan Africa and Southeast Asia, this is something that is very commonly seen all around the world, where just as a quick statistic, in Sub-Saharan Africa, averages around 9 power outages per month, which is pretty severe just because of the state of a lot of the distribution systems. So there's even more of an urgent need for a lot of businesses and public facilities to install kind of microgrids to provide that kind of resilience. The second reason is, of course, for a cleaner energy mix, and especially the ability and agency for communities and businesses to decide to adopt renewable energy, and kind of solar is really big here, without depending on kind of the central grid and just the energy mix there. There's been some really exciting progress around community solar in New York and kind of in the, around the US. And globally, there's a huge movement to kind of leapfrog across the traditional energy path of, for example, large coal power plants that you see in many parts of Southeast Asia directly into solar microgrids to provide power to communities. So that's another one of the main drivers. And the last one is energy access in remote sites, which is very much a main driver in emerging markets. And we're seeing some of that in the US as well, where kind of local generation is often a more economical choice and a more viable choice when you're dealing with remote geographies, whether that's in California with communities that have been affected with the wildfires and you want to minimize the risk of additional wildfires through kind of long distance transmission, or that's, for example, this photo of a system that I worked on in Myanmar, when you're far from the central grid and, providing solar is more economical than, depending on diesel generators and things like that. So I wanted to give kind of some additional examples of, these are solar storage systems here, especially ones that, these are all ones that I've kind of worked with or seen, and just how similar they can be from a, US and here California environment and a global environment. So here's some kind of, the top is community microgrids. So these are islanded microgrids that provide energy for the whole community, mostly households. Here's one in Briceburg, California, which was kind of newly built by PG&E after the wildfires affected them in 2019. And here's another community microgrid in Nigeria that we're working with in Ilu, where they're really driven by a lot of the same needs, and actually the system configuration from a technological perspective in terms of the type of, for example, panels they're using, inverters, controllers, energy storage is actually quite similar. And it's people from across the globe finding the same solution for kind of similar problems. On the bottom as well, these are both hospitals. This is a Kaiser Permanente hospital microgrid in Richmond in California, and this is a hospital down in Dawei in the south of Myanmar that we're also working with Ilu, where it's really the kind of configurations, the kind of needs, the kind of work that is done on them is quite similar, and this is providing critical kind of backup power to facilities that would have serious consequences if the power is shut off. So, want to provide just one more kind of quick example of an energy access case study. This is one that I had built in Myanmar, and there was a quick photo of, here's a community of around 250 households in the south of Myanmar, which is far from the central grid, and right now depend on kind of diesel generators for occasional power, so 3 hours a day of quite expensive electricity. And we were able to go in and install a solar microgrid there, which provides 24/7 kind of electricity with clean energy to all the households, a lot of the businesses in the area, the schools, the medical clinic, et cetera, in a clean and reliable way. Wanted to quickly go in a little bit of challenges around distributed generation as well, because this is a new model of providing electricity for a lot of areas, and so it also requires some operational changes that developers, operators usually have to deal with. I wanted to send kind of a quick reminder here that there's often a lot of talk around the technology that's used from a hardware perspective, or from an algorithmic perspective, or around the policy that's involved in order to get these systems on the ground. But one thing that that people sometimes forget is that kind of no matter what algorithms are used, what battery technology is used, what energy policy kind of certification is used, someone on the ground, usually a technician, will need to go kind of install that technology, commission it, maintain it, and fix it. So the people that are really pushing this forward system by system, kind of kilowatt by kilowatt, are technicians and field workers on the ground. And that's, the same case no matter where you are. There's some, of course, when you're dealing with distributed systems, so these are, these are kind of individual systems and smaller systems. A lot of times that these field technicians are working on their own for part of the process, whether that's surveying work, whether that's commissioning work. And because this industry is growing so quickly, there's a huge need for new technicians. And a lot of times training programs don't actually kind of provide all the full kind of on the ground skills that technicians need to do a lot of this work independently and troubleshoot independently. So, the thing that, we've seen around field work is that communication and coordination and how do you disseminate information to field techs on the ground can get pretty messy pretty quickly. And this is kind of the status quo that we see for a lot of these operations. It's run on, whether that's Slack or WhatsApp, and kind of sending information back and forth, going through, heavy manuals, 100-page manuals to try to find the right information for specific equipment. SOPs are kind of standalone and kind of hard to find when you're, out there on the kind of truck roll by yourself on site, trying to either perform some maintenance or troubleshooting or whatever it is. So, this, I think, is something that is a key challenge for these distributed systems that is very different from, when you have a large power plant and a whole team there and all the information kind of available there. When you're working with more remote teams, there just needs to be more kind of technology or software to help plug that gap. So this is what we're doing with ELU. We're building a new tool to help to manage field teams and field work. Here's a technician actually using our app in Myanmar. So it's a full suite of kind of field work management platform for owners and operators of decentralized renewable energy. It helps managers and operators see all their work in one place. And here's kind of a quick snapshot of that. And then more importantly, this is something that we've been developing, especially for international clients. How do you standardize work instructions, SOPs, in a way that technicians can see and flip through that as they're doing the work and kind of take photos, take notes, report issues, escalate things as they're doing the work, instead of, trying to find a manual and flip through that, or maybe it's not even on site. We're trying to integrate that together on our platform. So right now, our platform is used in a number of countries across the globe, and we're bringing on kind of new users as kind of DREs are expanding. Yeah, here's some kind of example user stories, some from the US for disaster relief, some in kind of other areas as well. But I'm kind of really excited to kind of be working on this and help push forward some really cool technology that is providing more resilient and clean power for people in New York, in the US, and across the globe, and to help empower field technicians to kind of bring that and bring and deploy that technology to people. So that's that. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Sierra. Next up, we have Maya Whalen Kitt. She's a ORISE fellow at the U.S. Department of Energy at Water Power Technologies Office. Maya works on exciting energy technology, so it's work that the DOE focuses on innovation and commercialization of novel marine renewable energy. Maya, take it away.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. I'm super excited to be here. Also very excited I get to follow Sierra's presentation, because we're going to continue the boat and talking about renewable energy. My presentation today is really going to be focused around what's considered the just energy transition. So considering environmental justice, social justice in our renewable energy transition. Let me get my slideshow started. So first, I just want to start off with a really quick background. I know we have probably a really diverse amount of folks in the audience today. I am born and raised in Brooklyn, grew up between Jamaica, Queens, and Bed-Stuy. And for me, the renewable energy movement is really important that we do not make the same mistakes as previous energy industries. So that, of course, means that we're a diverse space in terms of race and gender and age and abilities. And of course, that we have transparency because we need to grow this industry really fast. This is just like a slew of where I went to school and other companies I've been part of before, if you see any things you recognize. I have a bachelor's degree and a master's degree, and I've kind of worked in a bunch of different environmental spaces, from hydroponics to grant management to marine biology, and just moved into renewable energy in the past 2 years. And this is the moment to get excited about renewable energy. I mean, I can say that from the Biden administration. As I'm sure you all have heard, the infrastructure bill passed in the fall, and that has put a ton of money into renewable energy development and infrastructure across the board in the United States. And of course, we want that amount of that infrastructure money to be thinking critically about how we can make the best types of projects that can help, of course, mitigate climate change and build up local economies. So this is something that I'm really passionate about. So thinking about the kind of connection between green jobs internationally as well as locally. And thinking about green jobs, they're not just, okay, yeah, we have a bunch of hourly workers, but thinking about real career developments. There is hundreds and thousands and millions of people across this country that are very concerned about climate change and are really interested in renewable energy, but connecting the two spaces and how that this industry can serve as an opportunity for real generational wealth building is a huge opportunity. So I initially got into the renewable energy space through community solar. So community solar is one of what I think are the most equitable methods of renewable energy. Of course, you know, highs and lows in every capacity, but the general idea is that a community solar is where solar panels are installed in, let's say, unused agricultural lands or lots or brownfields. And of course, they're generating electricity from the sun, and then that solar farm is then connected to the utility grid. And the utility grid uses the already existing physical infrastructure of energy distribution to then, of course, connect electricity, clean 100% renewable electricity to businesses, houses, et cetera. And there's opportunities with states that have community solar programs to have what's called RECs, or renewable energy credits, so that there's savings because renewable energy and solar is, of course, cheaper than fossil fuels per kilowatt hour. So there's state incentives. Of course, it varies from state to state. I'm going to talk about New York State in a minute because we were a leader in this space, which is why I am a very proud New Yorker and excited to share about our policies. But another part to notice about community solar is that it is an opportunity for people like apartment dwellers or urban folks to get the benefits of renewable energy in terms of the savings versus kind of a more traditional net metering system, which most people think about when they think of solar as rooftop, and that of course you have to own a house. And that is a very limiting factor that has been, you know, historically marginalized communities have been redlined out of home ownership. So for an equitable clean transition, we need kind of distributed ownership. And there's a couple other community solar models called like community choice aggregation, which is an idea where an entire community would actually own the lease of the solar farm instead of like a third-party company. And then there's an opportunity for kind of continuous income generation for, let's say, a municipality. And this is an idea that right now is, I think, only in about 15 states in the US, and is slowly really expanding because it's like a state-by-state policy thing. I just want to share that because I thought it was really interesting. So this is what I was saying about the New York State has community solar policies that enable anyone to get these energy savings credits. Of course, the financial benefit is great, but then you are also making sure that all of the money that we are spending on our energy is not going towards a fossil fuel generation, but renewables. So these are some examples of what they like tangibly look like across, sorry, little things, to tangibly look like across the world. So I think about the size of a big parking lot. Unfortunately, in New York City, we don't have a lot of that space, but there's a number of different projects being proposed, either in Westchester or in the Con Ed system to hopefully expand that. And then, of course, we have all the possible offshore wind developments happening, potentially south of Brooklyn. I probably do not have enough time to get into all of that today, but I can put some links in the chat afterwards about the BOEM permitting for offshore wind for the New York Bight, which is potentially going to be connected to Con Ed to again create more RECs and more renewable energy credits for New York City. So New York State in general is considered one of the leaders in clean energy equity policy. In 2019, the Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act, also known as CLCPA, was passed, which is a very exciting moment within this space. And the goal, of course, was to protect the planet, invest in marginalized communities. So not just, having blue-collar jobs and stuff like that, but really there's a lot of money in clean energy. There's so much money. If you talk to anyone in the finance world, all they're asking is where can I invest? I would like that money to be really reinvested into real communities in New York. So, and then of course the CLCPA also sets a renewable energy or emission standards. So having like 70% of our electricity come from renewable sources by 2030 and move on our way towards net zero. So New York State, way ahead of the time. The federal government just got up to speed, which is also very exciting. So you may have heard of the Justice 40 initiative, which is spearheaded by the Biden-Harris administration. And this is for 40% of federal funding to go specifically to low-income communities or what's called frontline communities that are at the front lines of climate change. So let that be coastal, folks that are most vulnerable to forest fires, hurricanes, environmental impacts, and stuff like that. And so this transitions me to a project that I'm currently working on in my role in the Water Power Technologies Office at the DOE. So this is a very exciting prize, the first of its kind, to be specifically focused on energy justice. It is a $2.5 million prize that we are going to be awarding in the next couple of months to support projects and programs that specifically help support a clean and just energy transition across any type of renewable energy technology. So this can be on a super local level or on a more like statewide or community-based level to build trust and strengthen relationships with strategic partners in disadvantaged communities. And of course, to build up businesses in a slightly different way than they've historically been. Hold on, go to the next slide. Okay, I know I'm a little over time, but hold on. So I'll just go over really quickly. These are the prize goals to, of course, enable clean energy and climate innovation and entrepreneurship, create smart clean energy jobs, foster grassroots innovation, and identify opportunities where, of course, DOE can help in the facilitation of providing experts and specialist opportunities to kind of think critically about how we can improve our communities on a base level. Enable development for the renewable energy transition. I just want to put this plug out there. The applications are due at the end of February. If you're working on any of these projects, would love to see your application. So you can go, I'll put the link in the chat. And you can read more there. So thank you all so much.
Thanks, Maya. Okay, so next up, we have Susan Kaplan, who is the Director of Materials Technology and the Chief Sustainability Advisor at HLW. Susan's going to discuss how important it is to create spaces using healthier building materials. She's going to discuss most significant toxic materials in buildings and what can be done to limit exposures. Take it away, Susan.
I'm trying to find my where I lost my share the scope. I got it. Okay, can everyone see it? Okay, we talk about toxic materials and human health. That's a little bit different point of view than everyone else because I work in an architectural firm and I teach at CCNY sustainable materials. I am basically a materials geek. What we'll cover today is what we said, why we're concerned, how you get exposed, definitions of clarity, for clarity, some types of toxic materials and their effects, what toxic materials are most common in buildings, and what can we do about this? Why are we concerned? Well, we're concerned because, okay, we're concerned, okay, page down, okay, so I'm sorry. Because it found that in a study of babies that newborn blood had 250 chemicals that you can find commonly in buildings. The other reason we're concerned is that in North America, we spend 90% of our time indoors. Among 100 million housing units in the United States, about a quarter of them are considered unhealthy due to toxins and other environmental pollutants. Why are we concerned? Because sometimes with the best of intentions, people will do things that are not good. It was like when, like 50 years, well, really it was more than that, 60 years ago, people would put things in a wallpaper to keep insects away and like poison their children. And it was good intentions, nothing bad meant. Here's a really scary slide. The EPA, by this time, it's an old slide. By this time, there are at least 83,000 chemicals that are synthetic chemicals that are registered in the United States. They're monitoring about 650 of them, and they've tested only 200 of them and only banned, I think at this point, 6 of them. This is completely out of scale. If you did this in scale, you couldn't even see the last 5 of how much chemicals there are in our society. It's not. Now, how do you get exposed to this? Well, touch. When you touch things, when you breathe things in, and when you ingest things. So these are the ways that the paths of human exposure. How long and how much time is a factor. There could be a complete catastrophe in a chemical plant could blow up and people could die immediately. Or, as very often happens in factories, over a long period of time, people get sick develop cancers and things like that over many years of being subjected to things. Also, not everyone is affected by toxic materials. There's some predisposition, some general weakness, but basically those at increased risk are children because they have developing brains and bodies, frequent ground activity, and frequent hand-to-mouth contact. The elderly, the sick, pregnant women, unborn fetuses. Also, another vulnerable population, which was talked about by Maya, we're talking about frontline communities and fence line communities, which are communities that are on the line of polluting factories. And also low-income housing, which is cheaper building materials, inadequate maintenance, and reduced access to healthcare, make those frontline communities and fence line communities much more vulnerable than other communities. and suffer a great deal more about when these things happen, as we all remember Flint, Michigan. Now, just some minor definitions. A biopersistent toxin is one that stays in the system. It's very hard to get rid of. It's and one animal eats another animal, eats another, and they just don't die, and you get very sick from them. Volatile organic compounds, we've all heard that word. It really only means things that evaporate into the atmosphere at a normal temperature and pressure. But a lot of them are very bad actors. They're semi-volatile organic compounds, which they don't off gas at regular temperature, maybe some heat or some higher pressure, but they're very often dust mites. What you see in the dust when you look in the light, those are very often semi-volatile organic compounds. Now, what about these toxic materials themselves? They have endpoints. An endpoint is really, you could say, the effects of these toxic materials. They're carcinogens, reproductive toxins, endocrine disruptors, neurotoxins. There are others, but these are the ones we're going to talk about. A carcinogen is something that causes cancer. It's caused by changes in the cell genetic blueprint. Some of these changes may be inherited, but others are caused by environmental factors, a wide range of exposures. Reproductive and developmental toxins and endocrine disruptors. Reproductive toxins can damage reproductive systems, both men and women. It's interesting to note that in factories all over the world, the people that are really subjected to the worst aspects of manufacturing toxins are women of reproductive age, so that they're really risking their own lives and their unborn children's lives. Endocrine systems or hormone systems are found in all mammals and fish. They're made of glands located throughout the body. The endocrine system regulates all biological processes of the body. Neurotoxins is a toxin that acts specifically on nerve cells, interacting with the membrane protein, and more generally defined as toxins that affect nerve tissue. We all know these in terms of lead paint, and any kind of lead is one of the most typical neurotoxins that we are aware of, and that causes serious developmental problems. It's particularly in children because they're growing. Well, who are the big bad actors in building materials? Okay. Well, there's PVC. PVC is the most widely used plastic polymer in America. Building industry uses 75% of it. 14 billion tons produced every year. It's in everything. And it is as I said before, is a persistent cumulative toxin. There is no way to make PVC or burn PVC in a fire or in a disposal unit. It does not cause dioxin to be formed in the air, which is the single most carcinogenic chemical known to man. Fire retardants. There's a long story about fire retardants I don't have time to go into, but it's a very fascinating story. Fire retardants are actually, again, biopersistent toxins. They are semi-volatile organic compounds. They're used in all kinds of chemical bases and some of the endocrine disruptors, some may be developmental toxins. There's a really fabulous movie called Toxic Hot Seat, which talks about what happens to firefighters who are subjected to these things all the time. Heavy metals are toxic. Again, lead is one of them, but there's another one of them, which is also a problem, is hexachloride, which is what makes things shiny. So a lot of things that are shiny. One manufacturer, Assa Abloy, when they come and they buy everybody, they bought a lot of companies. The first thing they did was get rid of the hexavalent chromate. Then there's things that we're also very familiar with, is formaldehyde, which is a carcinogen. If I purposely took this picture that shows an old-fashioned sign of this, they've known for a very, very long time that this is toxic, and it's not forbidden. Teflon, which is also a biopersistent toxin, used in finishing. It's Teflon. Why? This stuff is really, really terrible stuff and causes all kinds of damage to people. Why it's not banned, I have absolutely no idea. There's another movie about this product, which is called The Devil We Know. It's a fabulous movie. You can get it online, and it's really, really interesting. The horrible things that chemical companies did knowingly with Teflon. BPA is in, it's those things that they say that they got out of all of your water bottles, but they didn't because they put something in that was almost exactly like it. It's all over the place also, and be careful with cans. If you look inside, if you have to look on your labels, and you should see which labels say that they're BPA or beep free, because otherwise, especially in things that have acid in them, they have BPA inside your cans of food. What can we do about it? Well, the first thing we can do is educate and others about this problem. And then we can find out what's actually in our products so we can make better choices, and then discover ways of finding better products. One of the things we can do to educate ourselves, and this is a great, I'll put this in the chat, is a great way, it organizes all these chemicals. There were 83,000 chemicals. How are you going to deal with, how is anybody going to deal with getting rid of 83,000 chemicals? Probably a half of which are toxic. We don't even know. But there's things that's called six classes. So you group these chemicals together in classes so that you can deal with the situation. They're highly fluorinated chemicals. Antimicrobials, by the way, are, although we think of them as being wonderful, they really are not. If you think about them as being teeny tiny pesticides with teeny tiny bugs. Flame retardants, BPA and phthalates, organic solvents. So these are the heavy metals. And these are the way that it's organized in a way to make it really easier for us to deal with this. One of the people who came up with this is a woman named Arlene Bloom, who was first woman to get very bad chemicals out of children's pajamas. She was also the first woman to climb Mount I forgot the name of the mountain. It's right near Everest. But anyway, and here it is, another way is to make connections. You see here, we see the six chemicals, the six harmful chemicals that we just saw, the typical things that you find them in, and all the different ways that all these different chemicals can affect your body. It's really interesting to make these connections and have some kind of understanding of what that is. Now, transparency, we said, finding out what's in your products. I know somebody else talked about transparency also, and it's easily detectable and easily obvious for us to find out what's in our, and to this end, there are actually tools out there that will help you find out what's in your products, and some of them will tell you if they're bad or good, and some of them will just tell you that they're in there. Something as a familiar reference analogy, which is a nutrition label. So there, these tools for finding out what's in your building products, the attempt is to establish a codified way of looking at what's in your products, similar to a nutrition label. So the main characters of this type is something that's the ILFI, which is International Future Living Institute. They have a database of products that have achieved a label. Now, this label isn't necessarily saying that it's good, but the label is literally a declare label, and it tells you whether what products, what chemicals are in your product, right? And it also tells you, they have a red list, ILFI. It tells you whether any of those bad chemicals are in that particular product. It's got a nice database. It's very easy to look up. Then there is the Health Product Declaration, which is, I was on the founding board of the Health Product Declaration Collaborative. And it's a great way for finding products that have HPDs. HPDs are, they're a little different than declare. They're much more detailed than declare. They don't have a red list attached to them. So everything, they let you know everything that's in it. It's harder to read, but it's a much deeper dive than a declare label. There are literally thousands of products that are on their website. So all these things are very good ways of getting to transparency and finding out what you can find. Now, cradle to cradle, which meant—
Hey, Susan, we got to get to the next presentation. Could you wrap up in the next 30 seconds?
Yeah, absolutely. This is a good one because it is optimization. It actually tells you which products are good or bad. And here I am, 2022, there are many tools and good products out there. We're ready to look for them. Thank you.
Thank you, Susan. Okay. So our concluding presentation, Shino Tanikawa, Executive Director of New York City Soil and Water Conservation District, New York City, needs to increase its sustainable infrastructure. So Shino's going to be talking about green roofs as opportunities to significantly expand green infrastructure on private properties. Okay, Susan, or sorry, Shino, all yours.
Okay, let's see. Are you seeing my screen?
Yes.
Great. Okay, thank you so much, Harris, for inviting me here today. So I'm going to switch gears. There's been so much information, my head's spinning. So just bear with me for one more presentation on something that I hope is a feel-good presentation. Green roofs in New York City. So let's talk about New York City rooftops. I probably don't have to really tell you that New York City is full of roofs. This is Manhattan, but even in outer boroughs, we are a very densely developed city. We have more than 1 million buildings, and that translates to about 40,000 acres of rooftop spaces. So what does that mean? Well, all those rooftops actually provides opportunities to create green spaces in the form of green roofs. This is a photograph of what used to be the largest green roof in the country. Now we've been outdone by a building in Chicago or something, but this is the Jacob Javits Convention Center in Manhattan on the west side. This is more than an acre of green roof. And we are moving ahead with private properties putting green roofs on their buildings. But if you look at the numbers, we're still at about 1,200 buildings with green roofs out of 1 million buildings in the city, and only about 60 acres of green roofs to date. So out of 40,000 square feet of roof space, we still have a long way to go. So how do we actually think about this? Well, let's talk about why we need green roofs in our city. Green roofs actually are an incredible sponge on your rooftops. When we have rain events that sometimes lead to flooding in some neighborhoods, and in many areas of the city, it leads to discharges of untreated wastewater. It's called the combined sewer overflow. We have green roofs that are actually absorbing that rainwater during the rain. And then after the rain, the water that's held in the soil and the growing medium can be used up by the plants to evapotranspire. So we're talking about green roofs of sponges that can manage stormwater and improve the water quality of our rivers and other waterways. So that's one benefit of a green roof. But there's a lot more, as you can imagine. This is a green roof somewhere in the city with an infrared photograph capturing the temperature of the green roof compared to the surrounding buildings. In the foreground on the right, you see the orange roofs, 2 of them. They are a lot hotter than the green roofs that are showing up in darker colors. So there's definitely a temperature decrease on the green roofs, which is always a good thing in this New York City heat island, right? So we want to have a lot more green roofs so that we can actually start to see temperature differences on our rooftops. And eventually, if you put enough of these green roofs concentrated in a particular community, you could probably start to see a difference in the ambient temperature in the neighborhood. Related to the reduction in the temperature on the green roof from the vegetations, you can imagine that could actually have a benefit to the buildings themselves. So on the left is a traditional roof. You have the water just coming in or the wind blowing and the sun beaming down. And if it's a blacktop roof, then your building or the top apartment at least can be a lot hotter than if you had that beautiful greenery with a soil medium that absorbs the water, and then the heat is absorbed by the water and the transpiration actually reduces the rooftop temperature. There's definitely a cooling effect. And in the Javits Center, they're saving millions of dollars by having a green roof on top in their energy bills. So there's definitely a benefit from cooling the community, but also cooling the buildings themselves, reducing the energy consumption and your energy bills. The green roofs also extends the lifespan of your roofs. Green roofs tend to last for 40 years or so before you need to replace the roof. as opposed to a conventional roof that's about 25 years. We're talking about 10 to 15 years more on your green roofs. And that is actually a great thing. Talk about zero waste. This is a long-term life cycle analysis waste, but we're talking about reduction in the waste production by reducing the frequencies by which you have to replace your roofs. And as a property owner, that's also a plus as well. Having vegetations actually is a good thing for air quality as well. So we're familiar with plants absorbing carbon dioxide. So if you have a green roof, you're actually absorbing carbon dioxide from the atmosphere and giving us cleaner oxygen. Plants also can filter pollution. A lot of pollutants can be caught up on the leaf surface or actually taken up by the plants, and the plants then in return give us clean oxygen. So there is an air quality benefit to having vegetation and green roofs on your buildings. And green roofs can also create habitat. This is a little chick from, I think it's a seagull chick on the Javits roof. So they've realized that once they put those green roofs up, and I think they originally did it to reduce the energy cost to the buildings, as well as to try to retain stormwater to be a good property owner. And then they realized that there are seagulls nesting, and now it's a wonderful wildlife habitat on top of Javits Center in Midtown in Manhattan. So it's a wonderful, wonderful thing that we can be doing. So how do we actually get more property owners to put green roofs on their properties? Well, carrots and sticks, like everything else. We have quite a few different tools, carrots and sticks, already in existence. There's a local law that passed several years ago, Local Law 92 and 94, that requires all new buildings all new buildings definitely have to install either solar panels or green roofs, and all roof replacements is also required to replace that new roof with a green roof or solar panels. Now, one of the things that we have been advocating for as a clean water advocate, and we're talking about clean water in terms of the Hudson River and the harbor and the estuary, not the drinking water, we want to see hybrid green roof and solar panels, which actually Sarah can probably tell you more, but there is research that indicates that a combination of green roof and solar panels are actually, it allows solar panels to function better, more efficiently. And we don't want to compete against the solar panel industry either. I think there's a happy medium where we can actually strike too. But there are also areas in the city where the building is too shaded for solar panels. We could still put up a green roof. So there's this local law that requires green roofs and or solar panels installed on new buildings and roof replacements, which is the sticks, part of the carrots and sticks. Then there is the Green Roof Grants Program from the New York City DEP. That's the public utility that gives us the drinking water, but also treats our wastewater. They have a grants program specific for private property owners to install green roofs on their properties. The catch is that you have to enter into a restrictive covenant, which means you have to keep that green roof for 25 years. Even if you sell the property, that restrictive covenant goes with the new owner. So that makes many property owners shy away. But if you know you're going to be in your building for the next 30 years or 25 years, this is a great opportunity for property owners to put up green roofs on their buildings. I want to stick with the green squares first before I go to the last one. There is a green roof tax abatement program, which is a property tax abatement for anybody who installs a green roof on the property, anybody who's actually paying property taxes. So if you're a nonprofit who owns a building, you don't pay income property taxes, then you can't access this program. But if you are a private homeowner with a roof that can be turned into a green roof, you actually get a tax abatement. And just recently, the state legislature changed the law to create priority district where the abatement rate is higher in many communities that are low-income communities of color that suffer from lack of green space, higher rates of asthma and other public health issues, and lack of clean air. So those are the community districts that can actually access a higher rate of tax abatement. But this program is a citywide program that's available to anybody in the 5 boroughs. The Department of Environmental Protection also has a large private property green infrastructure grants program. This one's not just for green roofs. Any property larger than 50,000 square feet can access these grants. It could be a green roof, it could be a permeable parking lot, or a combination of the two, or any other green infrastructure practices. But it's definitely a wonderful program. And this one does not stick you with a restrictive covenant as a property owner. This is a straight up grant that you can take and you are not stuck with it for 25 years. The last square I have is the water rate restructure. This is really looking at how we all pay for water in New York City. Right now, the way we pay for water is completely blind to how much stormwater you generate on the property. That means if you have a multiple family building, let's say a brownstone with 3 families, and you actually have a green roof on top and a backyard that's planted, you actually might be paying more for your water in a building like that because you have families, you use water, and you may not be generating a lot of stormwater because you have a green roof and a yard, but you're actually charged for the amount of water you use. So you might be paying more than, let's say, a big box retailer with a huge flat roof without a green roof and a 300 car parking lot right outside without any vegetation. But that retailer only has 2 bathrooms. So they're paying for water they use in the bathrooms, and they're not paying for the amount of stormwater they produce on their property. Now, many of us believe that's not the right way to incentivize green infrastructure. If we want to have the retailer access the green roof tax abatement or the large property GI grants really to take advantage of the carrots that are available, then we also have to hold them accountable for the amount of stormwater that their property is producing. So we're looking into how we can restructure how we pay for water, maybe charging a lot more for those properties that produce stormwater, regardless of how much water they use, and giving credit if they put up green infrastructure on their property. So this is in the works, and we're hoping that we can create an incentive and a regulation within the water rate and how we pay for water. So there are a couple emerging areas in this green roof field right now. One of them, again, is this combination of solar and green roof. I would really love to see more of these. It's great to have solar panels, but it's also great to have greenery. So why can't we have both? And the answer is we probably can on many of the properties. And also, when we think about green roofs, we think about flat roofs. But as this picture shows you, there are ways to put green roofs on inclined roofs. And I think there are a lot more opportunities if you can think of green roofs as a combination of flat roofs, but also inclined roofs like this. And you can actually turn it into a green wall, continuous green wall green roof. So there are a lot of design opportunities here as well. And that was a whirlwind. And here's my contact information. And thank you so much for your attention.
Thank you, Shino. That last point you made about the how bigger buildings don't pay their fair share for stormwater, that's really eye-opening. Well, that concludes the presentations. I really could have listened to all of those presentations if they were twice as long. And I hope to do so one day. So with that, we can open it up to some Q&As for like the next 10 minutes or so. You can drop your questions in the chat and I'll read them off. I can get it started. Celeste, you mentioned there were some restaurants in New York City. that were qualified under your rating system. What are they?
Yeah, we have currently Sen Studio, which is a Matthew Kenny collaboration. He does plant-based foods, which is really cool. That recently opened, so that's a great one to check out. And then also Westbourne used to have a former brick and mortar front, but they've currently moved due to the pandemic and other things related to that, to more of a online ordering system, but they're still certified with us because they still have their own operations. So I would check out Westbourne and I would check out Sen Studio.
Cool. All right. Thanks for the recommendation.
Yeah.
Looks like we have a question for Shino. What made you choose marine science over other natural sciences like geology or atmospheric studies? And as you progressed during your time of studies, how did you decide the path you took was the right one in terms of green roofing and redesigning?
Ooh, okay. So I became a marine biologist or studied marine sciences because I became a scuba diver. And I went scuba diving and I fell in love with the marine environment. And I realized that New York City is a coastal city. So that's why I went into marine environmental sciences. And then while I was working on my master's thesis, I had my first daughter and I stayed home for a little while. And when I was ready to re-enter the workforce, I didn't want a full-time job. So I landed on this part-time job at the Hudson River Foundation as a research assistant. And from there, I met people who were working on natural resource issues in New York City. And that's sort of the trajectory that took me to Soil and Water Conservation District, which have always advocated for managing rainwater where the rainwater actually falls, rather than wait for that rainwater to enter the sewer system and go to the wastewater treatment plant. So we were talking about green infrastructure before that term existed back in the 90s. I hope that's a good enough of an answer.
Thank you for sharing that. Sorry, I lost my chat real quick. Looks like we have a question from Maya. Have you seen any opportunities at the DOE in wind or other marine technologies that can promote the same sort of values as community solar?
Yeah, so I really love this question. It's not as straightforward at the current moment because just of the amount of infrastructure that will take for offshore wind or offshore marine kinetic energy. Was considered the technology readiness level is just farther behind solar. So just the cost for deployment. And then of course you have to deal with the permitting process because you are operating within the what's called the commercial zone of the United States. That being said, there is some what's called like communities, wind farms, a very similar policy process to community solar or community choice aggregation, with just instead of a solar farm, an onshore wind farm. So it'd be slightly less kilowatts per hour for production, but still a pretty equitable solution. This is a big conversation that is happening in the federal government right now, for sure. I can say that.
All right, thank you. Jackson, I was wondering, it seems like the Adams administration would be pretty receptive to a lot of the proposals at Open Plans. I was wondering, what's your read on the Adams administration so far and cooperation with them and such?
Thanks, that's a great question. I think it's still early, so I think there's some hopeful signs though. No certainties, but for example, today, Mayor Adams was in South Brooklyn announcing pretty significant and pretty aggressive targets for intersections and redesigning intersections, which we've seen design is one of the ways, and frankly, the most impactful way to have safer streets. So I think from a safer street perspective, he is giving Commissioner Rodriguez, former council member in Inwood, a lot of runway to make safer streets in New York City. I mean, this past year, unfortunately, has been the most dangerous in New York City in the context of Vision Zero under the de Blasio legacy. I think for public space management, we continue to have a lot of work to do around pitching this to Mayor Adams and people in his administration in a way that meets their goals, particularly around public safety. And so there's been some research out of Philadelphia that shows investment in vacant lots, for example, has also reduced gun violence in Philadelphia. And so I think there's a lot of linkages that we hope to make to show his administration. That's just one of them. I think he's also very focused on tangible quality of life aspects in New York City, such as trash pickup. And so, like I said in the presentation, it's not necessarily something that comes top of mind for public space, but we also do conversely recognize when public space is dirty or when there's illegal dumping there. So it really is fundamental to how we have a good experience or a bad experience in public space. I think in conclusion there, I'm also hopeful for council members. A lot of people have championed sustainability public space in various forms across the city. Someone like Tiffany Caban talking about renewable Rikers as just one example.
Good. All right, that gives me some hope. Thank you. So here's a question for Sierra from Raul. It's my understanding that financing microgrid solar projects can be tough because they are so small and thus traditional investors are not interested. What has been your experience in this area? And it seems like Giannis, I'm assuming this project is also for yours as well, or this question. He mentioned Bitcoin and NFTs. Is that an area you're looking into at all? Yeah.
Yeah, so I'll tackle those questions one at a time. So that's definitely, I also come from a kind of finance background, and that's, definitely one of the challenges toward smaller systems, distributed renewables, because they're smaller. How do you standardize them, package them, finance them in a kind of efficient way? How do you make them kind of more similar to larger power plants, especially from a financing perspective? There's been a lot of progress on that. A lot of those there's a lot of programs that are supported by the likes of the World Bank or the IFC or ADB, which, I've worked with in Myanmar, which essentially standardize kind of microgrid projects and bring in financing from kind of large institutional investors, as well as some kind of smaller private investors, kind of infra funds, the typical kind of investor profile into those projects, because you do have someone who is overseeing that implementation. So, for example, the World Bank Institute project in Myanmar now has around 200 different microgrids that are all kind of standardized and funded together. And that helps provide a good guarantee for kind of private equity investors into these types of projects as well. Let's see, I think in the US, there's some kind of exciting kind of financial innovations to this end as well. You see a lot of energy as a service type microgrids that are now coming up, where you actually have the developer that is kind of financing the project, or there's kind of leasing kind of contracts as well, or other PPAs, which make it easier for off-takers, businesses, kind of community systems to kind of install these projects, because you don't have to pay for all of it up front. There's a variety of things that are making kind of financing these systems easier. I think lastly, I think there is some movement into kind of Bitcoin or NFTs. There's into these, I think less so for larger kind of commercial industrial microgrid systems, but there is now pretty interesting technology that is implementing microgrids as a mesh network. So you have smaller kind of solar home systems between each house, but then they can trade energy between each other and build up basically a networked microgrid. And there's been trials for this, I think in Bangladesh is there's a lot to them. In Rwanda, there's a project to that effect too. And some of those are leveraging kind of the blockchain for how they do energy trading. But yeah.
Thank you, Sarah. One more question for Shino. are there incentives for groups of smaller buildings to commit to green roofs? Then also to piggyback that, I was wondering if you had any numbers for what percentage of roofs in New York are green, and is the trend of green roofs going up lately?
Okay, so multiple units or multiple properties together, the city hasn't quite figured out how to create a program that allows multiple property owners to access some of these incentives. So the DEP is actually aware because they've had inquiries from small property owners saying that we have, quite a few building owners that are together. They would like to do something together. So I'll have to touch base with the DEP folks to figure out if they've come up with any great mechanisms for multiple property owners to go into green roofs together. But at the moment, I'm not aware of any incentive programs that allows multiple property owners to access together. But it really, I think, is necessary for some of the smaller property owners. So it's definitely something that's come up before. And I'm sorry, what was the second part of the question you had?
Oh, it was just about any numbers on like what percentage of green roofs in New York?
It's a tiny
Yeah.
percent, less than 1% at the moment. But the trend is more green roofs, and certainly with the local law 9294 that requires new buildings to have green roofs, we will see more green roofs coming online, but not at the rate that we would like to see happen, which is why incentives will become more important.
Okay, great. So with that, we're coming up on, well, actually it's a couple of minutes past 8 now. So I just want to have some closing statements. First of all, thank you again to all the speakers. Really great presentations. I want to mention our next forum is Hydro Clean Energy. It's going to be on February 16th. More details to come, so keep following Green Home, and we're going to release that Eventbrite soon. Please also consider following us on LinkedIn, Instagram, and Twitter as well. So thank you all so much for joining us. I'm going to follow up with all of you with a link to the video, which will be on our YouTube channel. So keep an eye out for that. I can stick around for a couple of minutes. I can answer any questions if anyone has questions about Green Home or volunteering. If any of the speakers need to go, feel free absolutely to. If you want to stick around for another couple of minutes and answer more questions, also free to do that. But this officially kind of concludes the forum. So thank you all.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. I put my email in the chat, so feel free to email.
Yeah, same with me. Feel free to reach out at me on LinkedIn or email.
Yeah, I'll include everyone's contact info in that email too, if people want to like send out emails and whatnot. And let's see, there's a couple questions that I can answer. What is going on here? Here we go. So let's see, Giannis just had a question. So the YouTube channels, it's just everything is Green Home NYC. So the YouTube is Green Home NYC, the LinkedIn. I'll send everyone an email with all of that information. So let's keep an eye out for that. And then let's see, it's in terms of the Slack channel, that is for volunteers. So if you want to if you're interested in volunteering with us, you can shoot me an email. That's at harris@greenhomenyc.org. And we can talk about some volunteering opportunities and then get you into the Slack that way. Shino, since you're still here, I see a question. It was, are there studies on what the additional cost per square footage to add and maintain a green roof is for its lifetime of 40 years?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure there is. We actually did a study 10 years ago, so it's outdated. But Green Roof Research Alliance, GRRA, which is a New York City-based group of green roof practitioners, I think they may have the figures or research on that, as well as Green Roofs for Healthy Cities, which is an organization based in Toronto, I believe, in Canada, but it's an international organization that does research, policy, and education on green roofs. They may have some of that analysis as well. So if you can email me, I'd be happy to look them up or direct you to the right people.
All right, thank you. Susan, I was wondering if you could briefly describe your role at HLW, because we were talking before the forum, and that was a very intriguing role. And then also Raul, after that, he says, lead in tap water is a proven dangerous chemical, especially for children. Yet current laws seem weak in forcing property owners to remediate the cause unless the readings are really high. Action seems to be voluntary. What can tenants do about that?
I think they need to report it. I think it really needs to be reported and let people know. Unfortunately, it is slow, and there's not a lot of people who are monitoring these things, as EPA is not doing its job at all, really, in about a lot of chemicals. It really needs to be, people need to get together and have action about it. It's not a simple answer, like call so and so.
All right. And your role at HLW?
Okay, I am the head of what's called material technology, which does two things. We are the specification writers of HLW, and anybody who knows in the industry, there are drawings, and then there's a written book. So I'm in charge of the people who write the written books, and that has a lot to do with how sustainable products are. We are also, though there is a sustainability group in my office, we are responsible for everything that has to do with materials, most material health, energy and materials, because things like insulation and roofing and windows all have to do with energy. We also are responsible for things like embodied carbon in materials. So anything that's material and anything that's sustainable and anything, we do all kinds of projects. We have to write the written part of it.
Great, thanks. All right, well, let's see. Here, we'll take one last question from Gregory, also for you, Susan. Sounds a lot to be fearful of. Should we just run away to the woods? Are natural environments that much better than artificial environments we've created? Or can we make them even safer than the natural environments?
I don't know, we can make them safer than natural environments, but there certainly are a lot of, if I had another time to do this, I actually could have done another demonstration to talk about HPDs and all these tools that are available for all of us to find out what's in our materials and in our products, and making sure that there are a lot of people now, the EPA is not watching out for this, but it's really, it's very interesting because the manufacturers have really taken up a lot of the slack in this part and really done a lot to make their products better. And there are a lot of organizations out there, from LEED to WELL to HPDs. I mean, actually, there are too many sources of tools, which actually can be very confusing. But that's something that you should not be disheartened by. There's a lot of people working on this.
All right, good. Well, I think we can end the forum off on a good note then, to be hopeful. And all right, well, with that, I don't see any more questions coming in. So for all of you still here, just thank you again. Keep an eye out for future events.